room to nail these guys with some questions. I appreciate you both coming. We have here Karl Bursa from Monroe County. He's the Senior Floodplain Administrator. And we have Shea, Director of Planning from Marathon. So they're going to be able, we're going to let them have an opportunity to kind of talk about basically the rules and regs, downstairs enclosures, ground level homes, and then we're going to open it up to questions. So, you know, these forms are kind of, you know, pretty much not, you know, we're not doing like a real structure to it. Just, you got questions, you know, let me know and we'll bring a mic to you so everybody can hear what your question is, because I'm pretty sure everybody might have the same one. So, the food is, they're getting ready with the food. I don't know if it's ready yet. So we'll try to do it where you can sneak off, grab something, because you have to go in and get it and bring it out. They're not going to bring it, you know, you'll have to just go inside and grab something.
Yeah, all their servers are caught in traffic. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. There was an accident, so we lost some staff here for the day. Anyway, do you want to just go ahead and get started? Just to let you know too, today's forum is sponsored by YPN. So at some point we'll have Alexia Mann come up and give you some information about YPN. She's bringing that to our area too, and she's really trying to get it off the ground. So we'll just, do you?
Probably stand here, because otherwise if we're right over there, we're going to be right into the traffic.
The traffic, okay. Yeah, that's fine. Is that okay, Steve? You're good? They're going to stay here?
I'm doing a skinny squeeze.
So how many of you have sent me an email or talked to me on the phone or said, I need to talk to Brian about flood? That's surprisingly not a lot of people. Me too. So we are here to answer all your flood questions. It is complicated. It is different between our two jurisdictions. We have a state model ordinance, and we kind of tweaked ours individually for each of us. And, well, the county is doing a better job in terms of the CRS program. So that is the community rating system. And how that works is the higher your score, the lower your score, because they count down from 10. Each period gets you 5% discount on your flood insurance. So the county is now a 3, which is a 30% reduction, and the city of Marathon is a 6, and we're working towards a 5, and so that's currently a 20% reduction. So for how that works with y'all is if you're selling that property and people have to get flood insurance, we want to give you that bigger discount, and that means we're going to have higher regulatory standards. And that's where Karl has stuff that the city does not. So for example, the county has the 299 rule for their downstairs enclosures. You're stuck at 299 square feet. City of Marathon, we do not have that rule. You can enclose your entire downstairs under your house. One of the caveats though is that it cannot be partitioned into multiple rooms. Shocker, I'm sure.
Can you turn it up more?
Really up in there? Oh.
There we go. I was like, this is as high as it goes, so.
Hello. We're gonna talk flood. So in the city of Marathon, we have 2 distinct flood zones. You have your V zone and you have your A zone. Your V zone has your high initial wave impact. So this is going to be your enclosures that have the breakaway walls. With the new building codes, they are also required to have venting. Some of the older downstairs enclosures that had breakaway walls, they did not have to have the vents installed in place. You would think this is contradictory since the water going through the vents puts less pressure on the walls, but it's the rule now. One of the other things that is different down here, which Karl has in his jurisdiction that we don't in Marathon, is X zones. So these are areas that are outside of the 100-year floodplain. They're in the 500-year floodplain and the 1,000. Marathon, we are very lucky. We don't have those. I say sarcastically. On our new maps, though, we may have those.
All right. Oh, that's a little too close. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Karl Bursa. I'm the Senior Floodplain Administrator from Monroe County. I'm a little closer. How's that? Check, check, check. Okay. My name's Karl Bursa. I'm the Senior Floodplain Administrator from Monroe County. I know quite a few of you from my days here with the city, and I know a couple of you from afterwards. So what Brian's saying so far, he's been 100% correct. Yeah, the county does have we do have X and 0.2X. I like to say I don't like to use the term the 100 year because it can be a misnomer. It's expressed as probability. It's basically in any calendar year you have a 1 in 100 chance of a storm in an AE and a VE flood zone. In the X flood zones, the 0.2X, it's a 1 in 500 chance, and for the single X, the unshaded X, it's 1 in 1,000. Basically, the way to look at it is if the guys in the X flood zone wind up getting soaked, everybody's getting soaked. You're probably looking at pretty cataclysmic stuff if the X flood zone winds up seeing flood in that area. So Brian is also correct that 299 square feet right now. Sorry, like I don't want to blast the speaker right here. Okay, so the 299 square foot rule is in effect for downstairs enclosures in Monroe County. The CRS points that we do get for that, it's minimal. Most of our CRS score actually doesn't come from higher regulation. It comes from little things that we do outside of the flood, your normal day-to-day flood stuff. For instance, the county has a stormwater management plan that's in place, and this stormwater management plan we get a boatload of points for. We get points for, I'm trying to think here, for public outreach. You know, me sitting here talking to you folks. We send out mailers every year. We keep our repetitive loss and severe repetitive loss status updated, which helps us with the CRS. That is stuff that you can do. You can kind of, but Brian's working on some of that stuff, I'm certain of it. And then, so with us, the thing that the big difference with that 299 square foot rule, that does wind up being a really big thing, because at the end of the day, what you have is, if you're in Marathon, you can have a proper garage under your house. You can't partition it into other rooms, and you know, you can drive through unincorporated Monroe and you can see where the older buildings are. You can always tell where the older buildings are because they're the ones who will have a larger enclosed space downstairs, or they'll have, you know, they'll be built obviously below flood when you know that this is a higher flood zone. So I'm just trying to think of what other fun things I can say.
One of the big ones that we deal with as a county holdover is convenience bathrooms.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I like to describe it as the Cusco rule from Emperor's New Groove, and that is no touchy. It exists, don't touch it.
Yeah,
and you touch it, no, it's gone, bye.
That's correct, and it's the same in the county. If you have a non-conforming enclosure below design flood elevation and it is not pre-firmed, that is, if it was not constructed before December 31st, 1974, and any work is done to it, it has to be removed. Likewise, if you have what they used to call a rec room downstairs, any sort of climate-controlled space down in a lower level, that for anything that was built before December 31, 1974, or sorry, after December 31, 1974, that is a post-firm enclosure, and we did permit some of them. So one of the things that I like to talk to realtors about is document, document, document. Call me, I will make room and time for you. I have more than enough time in a day to answer all your questions, especially if you have any question about the legality of a downstairs enclosure, or if you just want to make sure that you're covering your bases. I always drop what I'm doing to make sure that you folks are giving your clients the best information possible, because at the end of the day, it saves us all time, money, headache, and grief. The amount of times where I've had people who have come in and have bought a property, have come in and said, we'd like to do this to this thing now, and then all of a sudden I have to be the one to tell them, sorry folks, you can't do any of that stuff. It happens on an almost weekly basis, and it can be irritating for the folks all the way down to outright destroying because they've already done something to it, or the previous owner has done something to it that now renders it non-conforming.
And a lot of these records are flood related, and our requirement for keeping those is as long as we're maintaining as part of the NFIP program. So we have records going back to county days showing all of this. So contact us. We will look it up. We have community inspection reports that the city did back in '07 to '09. We still do those. It's an application. We don't charge you that much. We'll come out and we'll try to help you figure out what's going on.
Yeah, and likewise, we have the county records, well, incomplete in some aspects. For most single-family residences, anything that was constructed after 1975, if we have a building permit for that building, there's a very good chance that we have the elevation certificate for it. I think they started using LCerts in 78 or 79, and at that point in time, even though that elevation certificate may be out of date, what you will see is you'll see what the original flood zone was that it was permitted under, and you're going to see the grade of the next to the building, and you're going to see what the finished floor was permitted at. That can go a long way toward determining whether you're close, over, under, whatever. You have that information, which can then help you make a good decision.
And then tying into that, we now have, because of ASCE 2414, we have base flood elevation, BFE, and design flood elevation, which is DFE. So what you guys mostly will be dealing with is BFE +1 or DFE, and this is for single-family residences. If you're looking at any critical facilities or anything that has higher people counts in the buildings, those are most likely going to be +2 using that form. Now, a lot of the stuff that was permitted prior to that adoption in 2017 building code.
Yeah, the 2017 rewrite.
So, even though it may have been permitted at that time, it may now be below design flood.
Which is another thing, just so you guys are understanding here. The 2017 rewrites, which became effective January 1, 2018, every building that was built after January 1st of 2018 is going to have that addition. The Florida Building Code went ahead and adopted ASCE 24 as our guiding standard. And so now, any new house that was built January 1st, 2018 and later is going to be base flood +1. Before that, you only had to build to base flood. And as a result of that, you're going to see a lot of folks, especially in areas where you could do like a 4 or 5 step up. You're going to see a lot of people who were built right to that base flood elevation. So what those people are now is they are non-conforming. They're legally permitted non-conforming, which means, and again, I have not seen this happen yet, but I'm not putting it out of the realm of possibility, where you've got a house that's compliant with flood elevation, who then somebody comes in, and let's say that the guy who owned it before was a guy who was he was pinching his pennies, he was just getting by, and he sells it to a dude who's got enough money that he doesn't care. He comes in and he goes ahead and updates the bathrooms, updates the kitchen with new Viking range Sub-Zero refrigerators, new Italian marble tile. The next thing he knows, he's over 50%. If he does that, the building now has to comply with design flood elevation, which means the house has to go up a foot, a minimum a foot. And depending on what flood zone you're in, that could be anything from an inconvenience to a massive, massive headache.
So here in Marathon, we have a few houses that are exactly like that, built prior to 2017, that met current flood, which was AE6, AE7. Just for reference, the highway right there is at 6, so they're barely above the ground, but now they are non-conforming, so I've been making people fill out the SI packet to track those costs, to make sure they've done that 50%. Yes.
Yeah, and something else. So Monroe County does not have what's called a cumulative substantial improvement rule right now. So with substantial damage and substantial improvement, for substantial improvement especially, if you're going to come in and you're going to do work to your structure, you come in, let's just use the roof as an example. You need a new roof on the house. You come in, and let's say that your market value is kind of in, but it's not low. You're going to come in, you're going to pull the permit for the roof. We'll go ahead and just throw out a number. Let's say that it costs you $25,000 for the roof. At $25,000, we're going to look at the cost of your building. You're going to cut the cost of the building in half. That's your 50% threshold. As long as you come in under 50, then in that case, you pull the permit, you do the work, you close the permit. As far as the county is concerned, that permit's done. We don't look at that anymore. We don't have a cumulative one where we would track all of your expenses. There are rumblings. The NFIP is currently being rewritten as we speak. They've been trying to get this thing done now for 7 years. Yeah, it's been. The new rewrites on the NFIP are talking about mandating a 3-year cumulative of substantial improvement policy in the NFIP to participate in the NFIP. If that comes through, then what we would have to do is we would have to track every permit that was pulled for 3 years, and if you go over 50% in that 3-year time, the building then has to comply. Now again, This is not law yet, but I'm letting you know that what I've seen with some of the rewrites, and it's out there, it's floating out there, so I wanted to make you guys aware that that is a potential thing coming down the road.
And on that topic, the City Marathon used to be a 3-year, and based upon direction from council, we just reduced it now to a 1-year cumulative. So where his closes out after the permits, ours is 1 year after that permit closes. So if you pull any more permits within that year, they will be tracked on that initial value.
On things that are 5 months apart, drop at the 1 year, that one item.
So if they're within that time frame, it's until that second permit. It kind of rolls with the permits.
Winter contractor versus somebody day contractor. How does that calculate?
I'm going to say this nicely. So the question was, how does owner-builder apply versus contractor for SI packets? The nice way of putting this is, please, please, please get a contractor. As realtors, if you guys want to rent, sell, or lease the property, you need a contractor. Also, owner-builders are taking their own liability and may not know how to follow all the rules perfectly. You at least have contractor standards for that, so hopefully you pull the permit with a contractor. In terms of the SI packet, the guidance is $20 an hour for the work for each of the items on the SI packet.
Ours is a little different. The values there are reviewed by the building official. So he actually is the person who does the review of the SISD stuff, especially when it gets close. Check 1 2. Yeah, okay. I don't want to blow everybody's eardrums out of who's sitting right next to it, but yeah, got it. Okay, yeah. So anyway, the building official.
You go down there and talk. This people boss that this man don't be next to you. Go down there.
No one puts Karl in the corner.
Sorry, buddy.
Here, how's this? Check 1 2. Okay, great.
Much better.
In any case, so as I was saying, the county, our building official actually does the review of the substantial improvement and substantial damage packets where costs are concerned, and we run stuff by him to make sure that what he's seeing is a value that is good. So.
And then we also have means books that he can use to essentially look at the costs that are, I think, tied to Miami is our closest one, to value what's being put into the property. So whether or not he may not have specific, he can look to that book for reference.
Geez, what else do we want to talk about?
Well, the food is ready inside. If you guys want to kind of go inside, grab a plate, and come back out, and think of some questions maybe you want to ask. You want to do that?
Before they
Keep
go there,
going.
Annalise, I was just thinking of something since I'm kind of point of contact here. Just so everybody knows about the flood maps, we are still waiting on the updated flood maps. It has been almost 2 years, just a hair shy, 1 year and 9 months since we submitted our appeal to FEMA, and we have heard nothing. I did talk to the Florida Department of Emergency Management during our community assistance visit the county had recently, and they did share with me that they have us for response sometime late spring, early summer. So we're anticipating a response April, May-ish to our appeal. In the event that the appeal is accepted, then the clock starts ticking, because then from the day that they send us hey, the appeal is hunky-dory, get to work, we have 6 months to get this thing adopted. So let's say it's May, we're looking at a December-ish time frame to get everything squared away and to get everything adopted. And once that comes through, then we're going to be under the new maps, new datum, and with the maps we're going from NGVD 29 to NAVD 88, which actually subtracts elevation from your existing grade. So here in Marathon, the conversion is 1.42?
Give or take, yeah.
Yeah, ours, and then up in Key Largo, as far as Ocean Reef's 1.57, Central Key Largo is 1.55, and it gets smaller the closer you get to Key West, where Stock Island is 1.33. So whatever your elevation is currently, so let's just say a nice round number, your ground is 5 feet. Here in Marathon, you'd wind up at 3.58-ish. Up in Key Largo would be a little higher, Key West would be a little bit lower. But the net effect of that is that when you're doing your surveys, your grade elevation is going to wind up skewed to a worse number, so you'll actually have to increase that elevation on the top when you come in for permitting.
And so the city has already adopted new elevation requirements for our height. We are now at 42 feet, and that was to account for those potential changes. And we did this when we first got those maps 2 years ago. But one of the things we will have to adopt as part of the new maps is the limwa. We don't have that in our current ordinances, so we will adopt that as well. And that's the area of limit to moderate wave action. So that's areas that are coastal A zones where you're going to have that initial wave impact going beyond that V zone into the A zone. So all those buildings will have to be designed to the V zone standards despite being A zone.
And you said that for you guys, that's when the new maps become effective, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Because it's the same thing with the county, where the limits of moderate wave action line, once it comes into effect, will impact you. This is going to be especially important when this does come through for those of y'all who have clients who are selling a property that is inland, but close enough to the water that you know that there's water there. You're going to have people who are going to be constructing to V-zone standards who are blocks away from the water. We have areas in Key Largo that are more than a quarter mile inland that are going to be in coastal A zones. And it's wild to think about that, you know, especially for pools, and the downstairs enclosures are going to be really important because you have to construct those to breakaway standards, and your pools have to be fully in ground. So you cannot have an infinity edge pool out of the ground in a coastal A zone.
Unless you elevate it completely out of the flood zone.
Yeah, there is that.
Which people have come to us 3 in the last month asking how to do specifically that.
Yep, we've had 4 of them ourselves.
Yes, it's a new flood zone that's accounting for the area between the A zone and the V zone, where you're still getting that wave movement, so you're still getting that higher damage within that area. It hasn't been accounted for in any of our maps until now, and so, for example, nearly the entirety of Old Town and Marathon is going to end up in that.
What was the question?
The question was, are the insurance companies on board with this? How deep do we want to get to insurance?
Please no.
So what are you telling these people who reach out to you so far? Like, are you adding more fill? Are you saying concrete pour? What?
So, if you are currently in an A zone, in our code you can put fill. In a VE flood zone, you cannot have fill. So if you are going to end up in a coastal A zone, if you're trying to get that permit now, you're permitted under the existing code. For now. And then in terms of insurance, I'm sure Mel has probably told everyone this before. If you have flood insurance, make sure that your new buyer tries to get that same flood insurance rolled over.
Yep. Yeah, that's the best advice we can give you. If the owners have flood insurance, tell them to maintain it, especially for anything in a coastal high hazard area or anything that's going into a coastal A. You want to make darn sure that they're covered and that stuff keeps going.
All right, we're gonna just take a few minutes. I want the people that are at the bar, can you go inside and grab some food? And while you're inside grabbing food, if anybody wants a drink, go up to the bar while it's empty.
We'll also serve around too.
You should look it up on YouTube when you can. It's really funny.
I did make the joke earlier when I was talking flood regarding our art installation. CRS does not stand for Can't Remember. It stands for the Community Rating System. NFIP is the National Flood Insurance Program. Everyone knows FEMA, correct? What else did we use?
SISD, substantial improvement, substantial damage. And Brian actually told you LIMWA means limits of moderate wave action. And actually, fun fact though, for the flood zones, when everybody asks, what does AE or VE stand for? I'm like, they actually don't stand for anything.
Very expensive and a little expensive. And then just some additional flood zones that we don't have down here. We also have AH and AO.
Yes.
Which, those are ponding flooding, so from ponding, and then sheet flow, so water running downhill like other things run downhill.
And we also don't have to worry about riverine or alluvial fan problems down here because obviously we have no rivers.
Yeah, we get great credit in the CRS program for our dam protection. It's a state mandate, but we get the credit for it despite not having that. It's awesome. So, just real quick, one of your other flyers, Mike is not here, but this is something that is very beneficial and ties into stuff that the city and county is doing. And this is flood protection measures. So you may have heard or you may have seen at council meetings or commissions the voluntary home buyouts. In Marathon, we purchased 5 properties. They are now city owned. They will eventually become stormwater and pocket parks. The county has quite a few in the program.
We do. We've got quite a few in there. I don't know the exact number. Again, the gentleman who is operating our mitigation program, his name is Mike Labachin, and he is available at the Key Largo office every day. He is very responsive, so if you have questions about mitigation measures, grants and such, you can contact him. We are actively looking for people who are wanting to join the buyout program. So if you know somebody who's not going to be living here anymore and has a house that's dilapidated or in a place where it would probably be 50% if you tried to fix it up, you can contact Mike and he will begin the process of explaining to you what it is, how it works, and if you're interested in going through it.
And then the other 2 flood mitigation programs are the demo rebuild and the elevation. Now, we had a course with local contractors 2 years ago now, I believe, where we talked about how you can come in and whether it's a stick-built house or a concrete block house, there are ways to elevate the house. Very expensive, and specialty contractors who would be coming in to do that. That's why we had this training so they can learn exactly how it was done. I believe there are a few projects throughout the Keys, mostly in Key West,
Correct.
that are doing this. The other one is the demo and rebuild. Essentially, you are taking this structure that's below flood, demolishing it, and rebuilding above flood in compliance. I believe we have one of those in Marathon, and quite a few in the county.
Yeah, and with the demo rebuild, really everybody, as soon as everybody sees that, the first question is what's the catch? Really the only catch is that you're going to rebuild above design flood elevation, and then in addition to that, you're actually going to have to go up an extra foot because you're going to be receiving public funds for it. And then the last thing is that you have to carry flood insurance for the life of the home.
And so this is a great project, and the Land Authority is the ones who are managing that. And Christine Hurley gave a talk at the last chamber luncheon last month, and specifically said, hey, reach out for these properties because we are trying to do this. One of the other things that she is doing that benefits us is the buying conservation land, and that goes towards our credit CRS under the 420 section. It's 420 for green space. That helps with our open space requirements and, again, that mitigation by reducing the potential flood hazard.
For the program where you rebuild, like if that home is later sold, how does that carry forward to obligate the new owner to flood?
You literally just asked the question. So it's going to show up in the title search. That's, to my understanding, that it's going to show up in the title search, and that they'll say this is this kind of a home. Here's the provisions, provisos, whatever. It's written into the deed on the house.
Okay. Frank, did you have a question?
Yes, you mentioned a few things on the reno. I'm still learning over here, so is there anything exempted from the valuation of a reno? Like you mentioned, like a refrigerator, but that's not part of the building. So what do you?
So built-in appliances count. If they're not built-in, they don't count. So the rule that one of the next coworker used to say was, if you can pick the house up and shake it, whatever falls out doesn't count. And this goes as well for fences. Anything that's not part of the house doesn't count. Pools don't count. Yeah. Roof is part of the house.
I mean, I can see
If the roof falls off because you're shaking the house, you probably need a demo rebuild.
So, if I understand, any home, 1975 or newer, there's a downstairs bathroom and still.
It may have been permit if you have a downstairs convenient bathroom. The county was permitting those at a time.
That's correct.
But you built before 75 and you can't find a record of that, does that automatically make it illegal?
Did everybody hear that question? If you can't, if the,
And a home that's built prior to 75, and there's a bathroom downstairs, and you cannot find any record of it, does that make it illegal, or is it grandfathered in?
I hate the term grandfathering.
Yeah.
Legally non-conforming. If it was permitted, it's legally non-conforming.
But if you can't find a record for it,
We will help you search as much as we can.
Absent permitting documentation, if there is no permit, if we don't have any permits for it, and it's something that would not otherwise be approved, we wouldn't be able to give you that benefit without you providing us with some sort of evidence of permitting.
And we've gone back with stuff like the original green cards from the property appraiser showing the pictures with the 1970s cars parked out front
Yeah.
and going, look, there it is. You can see it right there.
Yep, and that has happened. The property appraisers have a really good database of their. You guys hear me okay? The property appraisers have a really good database of old permit cards, and these are from, I think they're around the mid 70s. And what they'll provide you with is they'll provide you with a sheet on an 11 by 17 piece of paper that has 2 or 3 pictures of the house, and then they have the breakdown of what they found. A lot of times, if we can establish that something was there at that point in time, like that we can give you the benefit of the doubt. But again, it's a case by case basis when you're looking at this, because sometimes you'll see one room downstairs, sometimes you'll see something partitioned, sometimes there'll be a bathroom here, and then you look at the way that it's currently situated, and it's over here. It's very much case by case.
Yeah, and we've had people where, sadly, they've come in and we go, no, here's the permits. This is supposed to be just storage. I'm like, no, we have the bathroom. And then every time we open the code case to go back through, we want to work with you to bring it back into compliance, and then it sells again. And we get notified, no, there's a bathroom downstairs. And we're like,
Yeah, that's something that happens with us. I guess I'll share kind of a cautionary tale here that happened to me recently. I had one of my realtor friends from up in the Upper Keys contact me about a house one of our buyers was interested in. The house was on the ocean in a VE15 flood zone, had a year built date after the firm panels were effective, so it was post-firm. They were permitted at the time to have a lower level storage enclosure, small, 200 something square feet, with a convenience bath. And she had told me she didn't think that the downstairs was legal anymore unless we permitted it. So she asked me to do research, and inside of 15 minutes I was able to tell her that we hadn't had a permit pulled on that property since 1992. And then she referred me to the Zillow listing, and the brand new Kohler water features throughout the house, the brand new marble tile, the brand new countertops, the Sub-Zero refrigerator, and the Wolf range. And that was before I even got to the downstairs. The downstairs had been completely gutted and redone. It was turned into its own separate apartment. It had been expanded. They had brand new kitchen equipment in their countertops, brand new bathroom stuff. It was on the market for $4,200,000. The property appraiser's market value on that structure was $425,000. That plus the 20%, go ahead and call it $515,000. So the 50% value on that would be about $260-ish. They probably spent that on the tile. It was one of the more egregious things that I've seen, and that was something where stopping, like being able to talk to somebody about that and being able to make sure that they didn't buy that house and get into that kind of a situation, because the first thing that they said they wanted to do is they wanted to renovate the whole place because they didn't like this guy's style. So like basically that downstairs was already non-conforming, and at that point in time because they were over the 50% rule, they were a foot below design flood elevation. So basically the whole house is non-compliant, and once you cross that 50% threshold, it's game over.
What happened?
So when you're talking about, like, when the flood elevation changes, and now homes that were okay today,
Yep.
in compliance, all conforming, and now their entire house is now non-conforming.
Correct.
So I thought I understood you to say then the 50% rule takes place, but to me it sounds like you can't do anything to that structure until it's brought to current code.
So that particular structure that we're talking about, you are correct. They're in a major problem there, because at that point in time, with the lower level having already been completely redone, and not to mention all the rest of the work that's been performed on the house, we would essentially need for someone to come in and provide us with an appraisal value before all the work was performed. And at that point in time, that appraisal value would be that would be their ground zero. We would cut that in half with you don't get a 20% benefit. It's just, if you give us an appraisal, it's the appraisal value, full stop. You cut that in half, that's your 50% value. And if the cumulative total of all of the work performed to the house is over 50%, you're gonna have to bring the house into compliance, which in this case, likely be a demolition.
So you're saying that house was post-firm too?
Correct, 1984.
Okay, so my question is, just to understand correctly, if you're in compliance now,
Yes,
and then become non-compliant
Correct.
after the change,
Yep.
then the 50% rule takes effect, not the one that you can't improve anything.
that's correct. So what's going to happen is you're going to be, the 50% rule is going to become effective for you at that point in time. Then you would be, what Brian said, legally permitted non-conforming structure. And in our case, we even have a further classification where you are actually rendered non-conforming by a map change, which is basically, if you're not going to be in compliance, that's the best way to not be in compliance.
Because then you can still use the 50% rule to make repairs.
That's correct.
Yeah. And on the 50% rule, there's a lot of wonkiness. We try to make it simple. If you are going to do renovations, get an independent appraisal. They're always going to come in higher. A lot of the appraisers know exactly what they're doing now, and they put the exact depreciated value on there, so it's half of that value. A lot of them will put it right on that front page to make it nice and easy for everyone involved. The other thing that we have is condos. Yay! With condos, the property appraiser does have distinct values for each of the individual units. Chances are you are never going to go over 50% if we are tracking each individual unit for its 50%. Having said that, in the city of Marathon, we had an example where it was a fourplex condo, and one owner owned 2 of the units and completely gutted everything. The amount of work that they had already put in there without permits put it over the 50%. How they solved that was they then bought out the other 2 owners, and they are still basically in limbo figuring out how they're going to move forward with those allocations.
So they essentially increase their...
Yeah.
Got it.
We try to be very
Floodplain
helpful.
exorcism.
If something seems hinky, just give us a call.
Yeah, that's really the best advice that I can impart to all of you folks here this afternoon is that if you have questions about something, if something doesn't feel right, if you just want peace of mind, give us a call. And I would say based on my experience, 85% of the buildings that I get calls about, I have some form of permitting documentation for that I'm able to get and at least provide you with some history of the property. Every now and then you do get the wonky one. We had a pre-firm house on Cudjoe that was built in 1958-ish. We don't know exactly when it was built. We don't have permits for it, but it's there, and it has been there since 1958. And in that case, what we did was we used the aerials to determine when it came in. We have aerials from 1959 that showed the house in its current location in 1959, and it was there for every single year leading up to when it sold the last time. So they were determined to be a legally permitted, non-conforming pre-firm structure.
And to plug this, all the city's permits are online, the county's permits are online, easily searchable. You can type in by RE number and it pulls up. You can look at all the permitting history. If you have any questions, you can reach out to either of us to look it up.
Pam has a question.
Hey Brian, are there
For Brian now, it's 1
We
year.
are now 1 year.
Yeah, they're 1 year, and for us, it's
Yeah, you
close
said-
the permit, it's done.
As soon as you close the permit, you said it's off the
That's
record.
correct.
The county.
You wouldn't want to if you didn't want. If you were not looking to go with the 50% rule and you put everything into one bucket, or just another example. Pam actually raised a really good point. The cumulative rule, if you have multiple things that need to be done to a structure, and that structure is pushing the 50, or if it's just in a state where you're worried about it, if you come in and you pull all the permits together, we have to count it. If you have a roof permit open and you come in for a plumbing permit, it counts. If you have 2 or 3 permits open at a time, that cumulative value, those all add up, and those are measured against the 50. You pull one permit, you do the work, you close the permit, you let some time pass. I'm going to let you guys use your imagination on how much time that is. But once time has passed, you come in, you get another permit, you do the same thing, you pull the permit, you do the work, you close the permit. At that point in time, the county's records don't count that permit against you.
Okay, you guys understand that?
And just to give you an example real quick, I have a compound on Grassy Key. They pulled a roof permit, and then they submitted for a renovation permit that would have put them over the 50%. I said, hey, bad news, you're going to have to bring it into compliance. And they're like, you know what, we are going to wait. And so now I have permits sitting with a time clock ticking. So in exactly 1 month and 10 days, I can issue that permit because the 1 year time frame is up, and they're starting that clock again at that point with their new independent appraisal that they have now, because that's going to give them a higher starting value.
And it's 1 year after it's closed, right?
Yep.
Okay, so Marathon is 1 year after it closed. Okay. Caitlin, did you have a question?
Yeah. So like that scenario where you were saying the buyer contacted on the property and you found out there was a lot of non-compliance, does that then require you to open a code violation on that property and they have to...
Brian, I'm going to have you transcribe that.
Can you repeat the question, because we couldn't hear it?
So if the buyer notifies us, are we going to be proactive in terms of opening a code case?
Yeah.
I will tell you politically that I am pleading ignorance and I am hearing hypotheticals.
Good answer.
Good answer.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to make more work for myself.
I was going to say, I'm following the I didn't see nothing.
Because a lot of us sometimes we're afraid to ask questions because we don't want to bring problems to our clients. We just want information and we want to convey the truth and as much information and disclose everything we can possibly disclose to the buyer.
So I can briefly tell you, when I was looking at purchasing my house, it had a downstairs bathroom under the stairs, and I'm like, that's not legal. And they're like, yeah, it is. I'm like, no. So then I contacted Mary Wingate, the county. I'm like, I'm buying this property. I'm under contract. I'm going to bring it to compliance. Here you go. It's going to get fixed. And then we got into the actual demo, and the bathroom was made of hollow core doors that then had chicken wire stapled to them and stuck it over.
Nice.
Yeah, we could probably, between Brian and I, we could probably have a whole stand-up comedy routine based on some of the stuff we've seen over the course of our years.
Can we do that on YouTube together?
It'll be called WTF, What the Flood.
I think that's so.
Ryan, the aerials that you mentioned, the historical aerials, can we access that online anywhere?
The city does not have ours online yet. That's one of the things I am working to get our GIS up and running, because we have 1959, 1975 aerials historic. Is the county online?
Brian has them online, but I don't know if they're publicly available there, and so I can take a look. Yeah, we have, I think our aerials are the same. I think it's 59, 59, 76, 82, 85, 89,
98,
94, yeah.
96.
Yeah, basically, once you get to about the mid-1970s, we have aerials about in 5 years or less for every little section there, until we get to 99, and then it just kind of goes away for a little bit.
And then it picks back up, and then we have a contract with the property appraiser where if we have a storm, they fly and we get nice new post-storm aerials. So that's how we sort of catch a lot of these issues as they come post-storm.
And speaking of storms, Brian just brought up storms, so we can talk about storms. If you have a property that you are looking to list, or if you have any questions about whether or not that property has sustained substantial damage or any flood damage in the past, call us, because we have access to all of the substantial improvement and substantial damage records, including, especially from Irma. Irma's kind of the bear in the room right now, because we have a whole bunch of stuff that is there from Irma that I can tell you within minutes where it is on our flag, whether it was flagged as minor, major, destroyed. This is really important for older houses, and specifically anytime you come across a low-lying manufactured home. If you walk into somebody's low-lying manufactured home and you can see the water from that manufactured home and it's really nice and real pretty and has a bunch of new stuff on the interior, you're going to want to call me to make sure that this person has done things by the book. Because the manufactured homes are particularly a problem in Monroe County with our code. So Monroe County Land Development Code section 122 subsection 4B4G. I have that memorized because I reference it multiple times a day. A manufactured home cannot be improved by engineering standards greater than that which it was originally permitted with unless it is elevated to or above design flood elevation. And engineering standards better than a mobile home are pretty much anything. Windows, roof, siding, any interior remodel that includes kitchen, replacing plumbing, electrical systems. It's pretty much as soon as you touch a mobile home and what you put back is not what was something that would have been permitted in 1980 or 1970, something when they rolled off the manufacturer's assembly line, you can pretty much guarantee that if it's not above flood, it will have to be at the time you're done talking to me.
And how do you treat mobile homes with additions?
How do you treat mobile homes with additions?
So it depends on the addition. So for example, if you have a Florida room and it's a proper Florida room, so if you have what we call a Florida room and it's a proper Florida room. So for instance, one of our places up in Key Largo, Calusa, they have mobile homes that are right at base flood elevation, and what they have is a Florida room, which is really a non-structural attached room. That the room itself is basically bondoed to the mobile home. You don't have what's called a structural attachment. You don't have screws penetrating the mobile home, attaching it to it. And in that case, hypothetically speaking, if you wanted to, you could back a rig in, you could take a crowbar and pop that thing off and pull that baby right out and head on down the road.
Keyword there is could.
Exactly. I'm not saying, in theory, for structural changes to a mobile home, it's rendered non-compliant and it's no longer considered a manufactured home. It is now considered a structure and has to comply with Florida Building Code. Yeah. What's that again? Impact windows in a manufactured home, same thing. Wow, Pam. That is the first time anyone has ever asked me that question. So Pam asked if you can pop off the Florida room, could you hypothetically put impact windows in the Florida room? And the answer to that is I am going to have to look that up and get back to you. I've never had anybody ask that question before. Wow, look at that. Stump the flood guy. Pam wins.
Pam gets an extra drink token.
There you go, Pam.
All right, you have to have more questions. Anybody?
Yeah, I do.
Everybody's so confused.
That's fine.
Elevated home where they close the downstairs. Can there be a wall separating if they build a garage, or it has to all be open?
One entire open space, no partitions.
So the garage doesn't matter.
It's basically your entire garage goes through the entire area. You can have the stairs in there because you're allowed to have parking, storage, and access.
Can you have a raised floor?
Part of it.
Part of it, yeah.
So FEMA actually has a weird publication on elevated secondary floors still below, still meeting building code.
What's that? How do we get that?
I can send it to you in email, but the gist of it is you have to still meet the building code requirements, which allow for the 8 feet in height for a room. And this is where you run into the issue where new elevated homes may or may not have that because people built to just the base flood standard or just enough to park the car under. So we have people trying to do a secondary elevated convenience bathroom but compliant to flood, but it may not have the height required according to the building code.
Correct. And then just to kind of piggyback off of what Brian's saying, if you have a foyer style enclosure that leads up to the second story, county code demands that what you do is at the top of the stairs, you need a physical separation between upstairs and downstairs. So you need a wall and a door at the top of that staircase that separates the lower level so that you aren't air conditioning. The air conditioning is what kicks it in. You can't have climate controlled space below design flood, and especially with an air conditioned foyer open to above. Again, it doesn't sound right, but the air conditioning could service that lower level, which we can't permit.
And then this also goes into the actual storm event too, whereas if the storm does knock out your entire enclosure, you still have that wall up top, so you're not open to the elements and destroying your house.
Correct. And then as the final addendum to that, for VE flood zones and soon for coastal A flood zones, that door at the top of the stairs has to be impact rated. It needs to be an exterior door at the top of the stairs for V zones and for coastal A's once they become effective. So current code, and that took place in 2017 with the updated Florida Building Code and ASCE 24. So that door at the top of the stairs in a V zone has to be an impact rated door.
Yeah, and you'll notice that we're starting to bring a lot more building code into this, and that's because of that adoption that used to be entirely planning related, and now we're trying to make everything streamlined and together, which is sort of complicating things a little further.
Just a bit.
So Brian, the elevated floor is just for storage and not an actual room like a bathroom or something like that. Can you have that in a downstairs?
So that still goes under that building code requirement.
You know what I mean? Like you want to store your stuff, but you want to have it up. You don't want it on the ground.
So, and we also have a few examples in Marathon, I think in the county too, where people have built accessory structures like a garage, and then they put in the car lifts. So they're elevating their vehicles up out of the flood zone within that structure.
But if you want to get our stuff off the ground, can you do that?
You can have elevated storage. The issue is, we are going to look at it to make sure you're not trying to end up with an apartment down the road.
Exactly.
It may not be your intention, but it just happens.
Kind of a
So with the old manufactured or mobile homes and not being able to make big improvements, like if an electric panel needs to be brought up to code, you're saying that cannot happen?
So electric panels, so if you're talking about like a meter and disconnect, if you're going to have a new meter service, 99% of the time a meter service is not part of the mobile home. But yeah, your electrical systems, like inside of the mobile home, if it's old and you're going to wind up talking to us about it. Yeah. There actually is I'm not going to remember the name of this for the love of God. There is the Florida Division of Manufactured, like the Florida Division of Department of Transportation Manufactured Housing Section. They have a document that you can get that describes the different levels of mobile home alteration, and it's a classification system going from 1 to 4. The closer you get to a 4, the worse off it is for you. 3 is a major alteration. When you get to a level 4 alteration, it is no longer a mobile home. You've lost all of your mobile home protections. It is now a structure that needs to comply with Florida Building Code, and especially with some of these things that were built back when Jimmy Carter or Ronald Reagan were president. I don't think I need to tell you that they don't meet Florida Building Code.
So let me ask you this one. The ones that are now a structure, does it go by current building code or the year of structure?
Does it go back to the year the structure was built or current code?
So it would be current code, and at that point in time, yeah, especially once somebody has actually turned a mobile home into a structure, and FBC kicks in, it's something that makes it very difficult for the owner to be able to continue using that property in that manner.
And what I like to say is a modular home is a lot cheaper to be replaced on site. And then another thing, going back to the buyout program or the elevation program, the planners actually met to discuss this in terms of how it works through our jurisdictions. In the city of Marathon, you are allowed to maintain your non-conforming setbacks so long as all stormwater is retained on site. So if you are only 3 feet from your canal, you can rebuild 3 feet from your canal so long as you're maintaining all of your stormwater on the rebuild.
Please don't ask me about setbacks. I'm not a planner. It hurts.
Essentially. So if your building existing now is 3 feet off that mean high water line, and you are demoing and rebuilding a new flood compliant structure, you can maintain that 3-foot setback, so long as all your stormwater stays on that property. Marathon wanted to be friendly in terms of our codes to allow for all the weird, wonky stuff that has happened since we started developing way back in the day. Because there is a lot of weird in the Keys.
Haley, did you have a question?
So homes that are like built elevation early 80s, 70s, but they're on stilts, everything. With the new design elevation, they're considered the non-conforming-ish. How does that 50% play into that?
So they're legal
The same
non-conforming, same rules, tracking that same 50%.
Okay.
But it's 50%, not, you can repair, you know, up to the 50%.
49.9, once you hit that 50.
Per year, basically.
Kind of a caveat to that though, one of the things that we're winding up, one of the things that I will tell you, the post-firm non-conforming structures for the county, this is where what Brian was talking about, where the county did convenience bats back in the day, or the county, if you're in the county and you have an enclosure that's larger than 299 square feet, was constructed after the flood insurance rate maps became effective. Post-firm non-conforming has its own code section for us, where if you make alterations to that, it has to be brought into compliance if the alterations are anything other than code compliance case or life safety. And even with code compliance, if code compliance has it with you, you're probably going to wind up bringing that into compliance as well. But specifically for non-conforming, post-firm, legally permitted enclosures, so just as an example, let's say that you got one of those nifty ones with the rec room and a downstairs bathroom and a laundry room. Got 3 partition sections of space, 920 square feet, most of the way above under the house. You want to do work to it, or like something's up with it that you need to get it fixed. In order to do that work, you would need to bring it into compliance to the maximum extent practical. So what I would not make you do is, if those are structural walls, I am not going to make you tear out the walls to tear your house down. I would have you go in and give us an engineer letter telling you where the structural walls are. You would remove all of the plumbing fixtures, laundry room, etc. And you need to make sure that there would be no air-conditioned space, and you need to make sure there was enough flood vents downstairs so that it was able to meet our 1 square foot per square inch rule. So that's where that section, 122 subsection 4A9, kicks in. And so that would be if you want to do anything to it. So if you have a post-firm, legally permitted, non-conforming, lower level, what you have is what you got for now and forever. But if you want to mess with it, then we have to come in, and that's when we would come in and tell you, okay, so you've got a bunch of stuff down here that we can't permit anymore, so you're going to bring it into compliance to the maximum extent practical.
Again, no touching.
What if it wasn't permitted?
Then we make you take it out. We have quite a few of those. I just, literally about an hour ago, had back and forth on someone who said, this bathroom had a permit. We said, no, it has never had a permit. Here's where it was just an enclosure. And then they wanted to expand upon the bathroom, had a guest room, add a bar, and other stuff. I'm like, nope, downstairs enclosure only. So they finally submitted just a downstairs enclosure only, removing the bathroom, and they now have the permit. Try to be nice. So the question is regarding the appraisals. If there's a dispute over the value, again, we recommend getting the independent appraisal beforehand. That's substantial improvement. Substantial damage is different. That is after the storm. The appraisers can look at what it was pre-storm and provide a value based upon that pre-storm structure.
Correct. The one thing, just so that we're clear, the storm does have a sell-by date, so to speak. You can't, if somebody has something that was declared substantially damaged, I'm using an example that I literally just was dealing with. If you have a structure that was deemed substantially damaged in Irma, and you come in 6 years after the fact saying, oh, I want to use the 2017 building value, you would not be able to do that. At this point in time, the substantial improvement and substantial damage desk reference manual, which we are required to use by FEMA, they have addendums that we have to tack on for dilapidation, neglect, and damage or repair. And likewise, this is another one that I just dealt with where I had somebody who they suffered storm damage but did not get any kind of a declaration. They didn't get a letter, but they said they suffered damage and they were trying to use the pre-storm value after they had done all the work. That is the very definition of trying to have your cake and eat it too, and we are not able to do that.
Yeah, we are very, very limited. We have a few in Marathon that are trying to come now, 5 years down the road, going, we're fixing our Irma damage, and it's like, okay, you're below flood. They're like, oh, we have an L-cert. Cool. We got the L-cert. It turns out that it's a split-level house, so you have the enclosure, then you have a raised elevated portion, and then you have another raised elevated portion. Based upon that L-cert, all 3 floors were below the design flood.
So basically what you're saying, if you find a property that, calling you, we find out it was on the substantial damage list,
Yes.
basically the value you're going back to is fairly current, so they're probably not going to be able to fix that, right?
So that would be if they haven't come in. Now we have had a few occasions where the person at the time came in and they hired a contractor, and the contractor provided the building official with a written declaration of what it was going to take to fix that property, and that turned out to be less than 50%. And at that point in time, the SDE determination, substantial damage determination, would be removed, and then they would be allowed to do that work. So sometimes you'll find, every now and then, they're hen's teeth, but every now and then you will find a structure where the substantial damage estimation was removed, and then they were allowed to continue moving forward. If you've got one that we have a substantial damage declaration on, where there's no permitting history since before 2017, there's a very, very high probability that it's been improved without benefit of a permit.
So what happens with those?
When it's brought to our attention, we have the option to bring them to code, especially if it's something where there are obvious permitting issues. Just as an example, we had a guy who came in he was replacing all of his electrical service inside this place, and he had just bought it, and he had no idea about the SDE stuff. And that's really my nightmare days, are the ones where I'm talking to a property owner who has theoretically done his due diligence and talked to the real estate agent who has sold him this property, but they didn't dive deep enough, or for whatever reason it didn't show up. Then we've got, again, examples of people who bought what they thought was a compliant mobile home that was not compliant, and they had to tear the whole thing down.
And,
Yeah.
and don't you still have people that are still going through lawsuits from Irma that are just starting to come back now, and they haven't finished?
Still ongoing.
Yeah, still ongoing.
It is.
I mean, and they're not going to be ending anytime.
Well, if you've been here long enough, I'm sure you remember, like, when I moved here in 2010, people were still fixing stuff from Wilma. Like, and I mean, and it's the same thing. I mean, I think that, realistically speaking, the average life cycle of hurricane repairs, I'm using that in giant air quotes, is somewhere between 7 and 10 years. Is about what I've seen in the course of my experience.
And COVID didn't help with the with the lawsuits, and that just delayed everything. And so, yeah.
What's the question?
COVID didn't help with that.
No, it definitely did not.
And then, so all of this is all carrot and stick. We want to have the carrot more than anything else, which is why we're here talking to y'all. But then there is a rule that we have not used in Marathon, but is still an option, and I believe, is it 1316?
Yes, so it's called Submit to Rate or 1316 Declaration. A 1316 Declaration is your flood insurance death sentence. If you have a house, and again they are usually very, very large, very expensive houses, where the property owner didn't have to carry flood insurance or had a policy that he just didn't care about, he did a bunch of work that rendered the structure unable to comply with NFIP regulations. And at that point in time, we have to file what's called a 1316 declaration with NFIP, removing that structure from its eligibility with flood insurance. There is a celebrity in Florida who used to live in the Florida Keys at one of our elite establishments who actually wound up having a 1316 declaration on their house because of an entire lower level that was not permitted. But
So that structure will never be able to get flood insurance
correct
ever again.
unless
So you're not going to get a federally backed mortgage on it.
yeah, unless the house, they actually did come in and they did fix the house, and we were able to rescind the 1316 declaration, which was one of the getting that off the books was a very, very fun thing because the file was almost 5,000 pages. It had its own filing cabinet.
Now, if a home was placed on the substantial damage list, is there realistically any way to get them off of it?
So the way that I said before, when all the substantially damaged homes that we sent letters out to, basically have a two parts to the letter. The first thing is, tell us how you're going to bring this into compliance. Basically, are you going to tear this down or what? And the second thing is, if you disagree with it, they offer you a way forward, saying that if you can provide us with quotes from a licensed contractor saying that he can do the work that you need to bring this into compliance for less than your 50% threshold, then we can talk. And at that point in time, if the building official looks at the contractor's numbers and deems that they're acceptable and that it's not him pulling the wool over our eyes, he can then rescind the SDE declaration and we can issue permits on the property. Absent that, and this is especially true anytime somebody comes in, makes me want to rip what's left of my hair out. Anytime somebody comes in and there's a substantial damage letter on the property, and I run across work that's been performed on the structure in the intervening years with no permit, it's game over. Like at that point in time, you've basically baked the cake, and you can't unbake it. You've really ruined your only real shot at getting that SDE form or SDE declaration removed.
So then, at that point, what would they have to do?
They would have to bring it into compliance, which would mean either elevation or demolition. Okay, so the question was whether or not we have the substantial damage list online. We do not, but you can contact us. Yes, and sometimes that works. Sometimes the Excel spreadsheet that it's based on likes to go to sleep, so I would recommend checking with us just in case.
Who's the contact person for that?
You're looking at him.
Yeah.
I'm fully expecting all of you to call me a lot in the next few days.
I'll tell you, planning at ci.marathon.flu.us, that way it goes to my entire department. We do have now 3 CFMs. George is one, but he's doing city manager stuff. I am the next, and now we have Amber, who is one of my employees who's certified. I'm trying to get more and more of our staff certified. That way we can help you as quickly as possible. One of the other things we have is, aside from the FEMA inspection, is the letter of current site condition, where you can apply online and we look at all of the existing codes and what's on site and tell you this is what you have, this is what you can do.
So for us, we have 4 offices throughout, 5 actually, throughout the Keys. There is a CFM in each of the offices, at least one. So I actually have 4 people on staff, including myself. Scott Frazier at our Stock Island office, Yaima Gonzalez here at the Marathon office, and then myself and Chris Edwards at Key Largo and Ocean Reef. Big Pine does not have a person there, so if you have questions about Big Pine, you'll call the Marathon office. Who else?
Come on, fire away. Anything?
Sure. So the question is, what is lower level finish designation? That is property appraisers speak for, ooh, I better not say this is FLA. What it means is that they have seen something downstairs which is not a garage, an enclosure, or any sort of utility room. LLF can mean any number of things, ranging from what we were talking about earlier, a rec room, an unpermitted lower level, or illegally non-conforming lower level. normally when LLF comes in, there is some use in there where they don't want to put it as FLA because there's questions about whether or not it was permitted. That I can't answer. What if LLF is above flood? I don't know. You'll have to talk to the property appraiser about that one.
Yeah, they don't have the elevation certificates, so they're just saying this is potentially, it's lower level and it's potentially finished. It's possibly got tile or drywall or... Yeah, we have pretty good records for our elevation certificates.
Yes.
As part of CRS, we have to maintain a 95% accuracy on all new ones.
We're 100.
I'm glad with 95. Luckily, they'll send a notice saying, hey, these ones are wrong, and we'll reach back out to the owners or the surveyors going, hey, quickly fix whatever issues there may be. You guys want to have these fixed because these will work towards your sales and your insurances.
Correct.
Outdoor kitchen.
kitchens.
So it depends on what you're calling an outdoor kitchen.
If you've got a grill and a glorified hose bib, cool.
Yeah, if it's something that is fixed in place where you've got one of those nice fancy Viking ranges, built-in bar with its own sink and stuff like that, that is not permitted.
Basically, we don't want that stormwater going into that plumbing return and messing up our entire sewer system.
Likewise, if it's in a VE flood zone, it becomes an obstruction and will affect your insurance.
If you have one of those nice little outdoor bars like that under your house, I don't know about it, it's fine. Once you start plumbing it,
Yeah.
then you got a problem. If you have electrical above flood and you're plugging in your fan, you're plugging in your neon signs, the electrical is above flood. I don't have to care.
Is that the same with the county?
Yes.
We like flood compliance.
Yes. We're big fans of compliance. So one of the things I just thought about from an earlier conversation Brian was having. One of the things when you're doing, if you want to do improvements to lower level areas that are in compliance, one of the things that I've had happen is we've got Summerlin in the airport area. You'll have an area where you've got an elevated house and he's got the entire downstairs wide open because you would park his Cessna in.
Well, when you say in compliance, you mean non-conforming permitted?
I mean actually in compliance. I mean, he's actually it's an elevated house, and he doesn't have anything in the downstairs. He wants to pull his aircraft in and out of there. New guy buys the place. New guy sees everybody else with garages, but there's nothing downstairs. New guy comes and talks to me and says, I want to put in a full garage down here. And at that point in time, even though it is a pre-firm structure, even though if it were permitted with a lower level garage, I would have nothing to say about it. You can't make a conforming building less conforming. So if you're already in compliance, you can't perform an action which would render you non-compliant. Does that make sense to everyone?
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Exactly.
And then we didn't really talk about this, but elevators.
Yes.
So that goes back to the access requirements. FEMA has a technical bulletin on different types of elevators, because we have all different special kinds of elevators. General rule of thumb is all of your equipment should be located at the top of the elevator, because that's up and out of the flood zone, you're not worried about it. We've had people that come in and they're on an LSRIP got flagged, and what they got flagged for was the flood sensor, thinking that that was electrical below flood. What that sensor does is, if that gets wet, it's going to make sure that that elevator cap goes to the top and does not come down, causing more damage to the elevator.
Yeah, there are some elements of elevators that have to be below flood, and those elevators, FEMA explicitly calls out that this is, if it's equipment that is required to be below flood, it's okay. Likewise, another thing with elevators, V-zone construction, you have to have breakaway walls downstairs. Your elevator shaft is your one get-out-of-jail-free card. Because your elevator shaft constitutes access to the upstairs, it is allowed to be solid poured construction. All the rest of your stuff, like Brian said, it has to be breakaway construction. And one of the things that I'm trying to press home to people. Concrete blocks, your CBS blocks, that your CBS system that you're going to do. You're going to have the blocks, they're going to be mortared at the joint, right along the top as you're stacking them. And inside, if I were to bore a hole and run a little fiber optic camera in there, it should be as empty as my head. There should be no grout, no cement, no wire mesh in between the layers, no rebar, nothing. The whole point of this is that in the event that the right storm wave comes and hits it, the PSI rating I think it's 35 PSI. Once it hits it, that place should just vanish like a house of cards. That is something that we're constantly fighting with folks about. And in the event that you do come across an enclosure that's non-compliant, if it was a legally permitted enclosure, we've got the permits for it and everything, then in that case you're allowed to continue until such time the 50-50 rule kicks in. In the event that it's something that is, if you've got something where they are not compliant, then we have to have a conversation if it was not legally permitted.
And then with V-zones, that breakaway element, you're going to look at that in terms of your electrical systems as well.
Correct.
So all those light switches are going to be located on the columns and not on those breakaway walls, otherwise they're not going to break away.
And along that same line, if you have electrical or plumbing lines, so if you've got a line coming across, the sewer line is the biggest offender here. Everybody wants to run their sewer line. Nobody wants to see pipes. Pipes are ugly. I get it. But at the end of the day, you can't have that stuff, the plumbing chase and whatnot, puncturing or running in a breakaway wall, because then it will break away. That's one of our big things. Their heads are exploding.
This is a much different talk than the one I gave this morning. It was very happy-feely about art and talking about sea level rise, but how we're kind of trying to combat climate change. This one, not so much. We're trying to be nice, but
we're also trying to keep everybody in compliance. Like Brian said, we like compliance.
Yeah, health, safety, and welfare. We kind of want to care about you and the residents, making sure you're going to live.
Yeah, minor details like that.
I just don't understand why the county would limit how much you can enclose downstairs, because it's the open stuff that gets washed away into the neighbor's yard. So why wouldn't you allow everybody to enclose it so it stays in your own?
Yeah, so the reason that the county has the 299 square foot rule in place is because we almost got kicked out of the NFIP back in the early aughts and late 90s. To the point where we were actually on probation. Our CRS rating was reduced to 1, was reduced to 10, pardon me, other way around. And basically what happened was after, it was Hurricane George was the one that kind of woke everybody up to it. When George hit, there were the amount of stuff that FEMA saw when they came through, all the lower levels, all of the beds and things that they found in the streets, it basically was obvious that we had a lot of people using the downstairs enclosures as living space. So as part of our remedial plan that we had to adopt, part of it was the limitation of the lower level to 299 square feet or less, as measured from the exterior walls. Big thing. We go from the outside of the walls, not the inside. And once we adopted that, that was one of the things that one of our things we did to get back in everybody in FEMA's good graces. The remedial plan was, I want to say that it was a 2004 ordinance. If you ever want to see it, we do have it online, and it basically is our floodplain ordinance from back then that was part of the remedial plan.
And the logic behind that 299 is that is an insurance regulation, and that's why that one got put in place. And we too, because we inherited the county's problems, we're on double secret probation. We are still audited every year for FEMA regulations from FEMA and then from FDEM separately. And then we have the other regulations based upon the FEMA Fish and Wildlife lawsuits where we are audited every 6 months. And that ties back into making sure we are not putting development in areas that have endangered species, which was the whole thing here in Marathon. We have the snake, the snail, and the tree cactus. County's got bigger problems.
Yeah, I can't speak to the FWS stuff, but I can tell you that if you do have questions about the endangered species stuff, you can contact our environmental services department. They can give you some idea. Then what Brian's talking about with the community assistance visits, because we have the remedial plan, we don't get the calves as often. Now that we're in CRS Class 3, we're going to get them a lot more often. Community assistance visits are FEMA's version of an audit, where they come in and you open up the books and you show them what you got. And if they're okay with it, then they're going to wind up giving you a clean bill of health and saying, okay, we'll see you next year. If they have problems, which they inevitably find something that they have questions about, then basically you're asked to address either how it got done or how you're going to fix it. And
we have quite a few of those. We just had one from FDEM where they came in and they're like, here's our list of properties that we drove around town and visited, explained everything going on with them, and gave us the list of what they wanted from each property. And so we had to submit back that Excel spreadsheet saying, here's the permits, here's the all certs, here's where it's compliant, and then the ones that weren't were like, here's where we referred them to code.
yeah. Yeah, and with the community assistance visits, it's really important because the calves are basically how FEMA checks your homework, like that math teacher who's always looking over your shoulder. In the event that we do have a problem with a calf, so far since I've been here, this one that we're going through right now is our first that I've been through, and you're always worried about stuff because there's only so much that we can do in our control. And it's like Brian said, they're ultimately, the good things would be for them to find a bunch of stuff and say, what do you think about this? Tell us what happened. And then we can answer all those questions right up. And where we can't answer the questions, we can say, this is the action we're going to take to fix this violation.
Is that something like if we failed in that aspect of it, is that something that would trigger those inspections again?
If we had a problem with a calf and it was a major problem, that would be something where they would ask us how we're going to fix this stuff. And that might trigger the inspection again, that might have them coming back every 6 months. It's up to FEMA to decide what the answer to that calf would be, or what the response to that calf would be. And again, I'm hopeful that we don't ever find ourselves in that situation again, because again, at this point in time, the flood insurance is so expensive. Every last dollar we can save our constituents here is a dollar that we can keep families here and keep our servers and our bus drivers and our construction workers living here and not having to commute from the mainland. The 30% that we get for CRS, which again, like I was saying earlier, our higher standards get us to a nice place, but our higher standards, the ones that we actually, that are just county specific, are very, very, very thin. It's the 299 rule and a couple of other minor things. Other than that, us in Marathon, our regulations are very, very similar. The only difference is, of course, we have a larger constituency. We've got a little bit more tax money to work with, so we were able to do some of these big ticket items that get you a lot of extra points.
Yeah, they have a lot more open space counting the Everglades.
Yeah, but we only get to count so much of it,
Yes, but you get to reduce the federally controlled lands from your square footage.
That is
so
true.
Here in Marathon, we only have the towers over in Good Key. That parcel is the only area in our town that's removed from our square footage for CRS points.
I'm trying to think of what else we can. The county does have, and I think Marathon, we all have, for the flood maps, we have comparison maps. So if you want to see where your maps are going to, if you have a parcel and you want to see, whoa, chickens. If you want to see what the parcel is going to be in the new maps, the county has a map that will show you 3 different maps. What you are now, what you would be if the FEMA maps become effective, and what you would be if the appeal is accepted. I won't tell you to go out and build to the new maps, because right now, God himself does not know what it's going to look like when it's done. What I will tell you is that it would behoove anybody who is going to be buying a property where you're going to find yourself either in that limits of moderate wave action zone, or you're going to be going up more than 2 feet in terms of your flood elevation. It would be really good for you to know that in advance so that you're able to prepare for it somehow.
Height, you guys choose
40.
37 or 40?
We're 40 now. Yeah, that actually is going to be, so the new flood regulations are our state model ordinance is going to be going into effect next week, actually. And then a little bit later down the line, there will be another addendum coming in, which you will hear more about at a later date.
You guys have more questions? Everybody looks worn out. Anything else? Well, we really appreciate you guys coming out here. This was amazing for all of us to get this first
Thank you guys for
hand.
having us. Yes, thank you.
And it's good to know these guys are accessible. They're opening their door and their phone lines to you. So if you have questions, don't be afraid to ask. And it sounds like they won't raise a red flag. Now that we don't need our earmuffs anymore. Michelle's gone. But yeah, don't be afraid to ask so you know exactly what you're selling or what you're representing as a buyer as well, for the buyer. All right, can we have Alexia come up? You want to come up? Does anybody have any other questions? All right, hang on one second.
Thank you guys for coming. We did have YPN sponsor this one to kind of give you guys an idea of what we were trying to do, working with Annalise with education and bringing in more stuff that maybe we can't necessarily do with the education committee, but we can do with YPN. Bear with us as we have growing pains with this. We had 30 people last month. There's over 50 this time. We only have 41 reservations. So please, please, please RSVP ahead of time so we can make sure the venue and food is taken care of correctly. We appreciate your understanding with the chickens today.
Yeah, thank you all for coming, and you guys again were amazing. And if you have any other issues that you'd like us to have a forum on, please feel free to reach out to me, and we might be having you guys back for some of those, I would imagine, if you don't mind.
Yeah, Annalise, I was going to tell you, once we do receive the update from FEMA, the appeal update, I promise you all, you're going to hear about it. It's going to be in the news, it's going to be in the papers. I'm going to try to have whatever that result is broadcast from the heavens so that y'all know what's happening. When the time comes that the new maps are ready to be adopted, you will know. You will be unmissable. And until that time, when the new maps are ready to be adopted, if you want me or Ryan or both of us to come back and kind of discuss the changes with you, I personally would be happy to.
Yeah, we
love
that.
talking flood.
Sorry, guys.
I wore my specific flood shirt because today was a flood day. I talked to Art and Flood and Sea Level Rise this morning, and now this, and then there's another meeting going on regarding 33rd Street and that redevelopment area, so it's on our brains every day.
I did want to bring in, and maybe you guys can direct me, that the federal mandate to raise roads, raise certain homes. I wanted to bring somebody in to talk about that.
Yeah, you're going to want to talk to Rhonda Haig. She's our sustainability coordinator, and she is the tip of the spear on that one.
Yeah, the county is leagues ahead of the city. We are working with Rhonda, Key West, Islamorada, Key Colony Beach, and Layton. We're currently all doing the LiDAR data collection. So that's using the laser scanning to pick up the road elevations. So the county did that a few years back, so we're slowly catching up to what the county is doing and hopefully getting into that funding as well.
And the LiDAR data is ridiculously accurate, like down to inside of 0.2 of a foot accurate in terms of your grade elevation. So if you're wondering what the grade next to your house is, I can tell you, as long as nobody's gone in there and dumped a bunch of fill on it, I can tell you pretty close.
That's good to know. All right, well, we appreciate you guys all coming out. I hope you got something out of it. I know I did. I'm sure you all did as well. But look again. We're going to publicize the next one. We'll have the next topic ready, probably within a week. Thank you.